WCEG Network on WCEG Click the live stream tab or watch us live on your smart TV, YouTube, WCEG Network. I'm Dr. Wanzo. I'm your show host for the next 1 hour for Mind Matters. We are the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into the community. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at WCG_talk_radio and at WCEG Network. Last but not least, the topics and opinions are those of the show host and guests and not WCEG Network. Thank you for your continued support. Good evening again, and we welcome you to Mind Matters, where we discuss relevant mental health issues. I'm your host, Dr. Cassandra Wanzo. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Atlanta for the past 30 years. Our co-host is Norman Carter Jr. He's a retired Philadelphia police corporal. He's written a book that's very relevant to these times. It's entitled The Long Blue Walk, My Journey as a Philly Cop. It's available on Amazon to purchase. He also hosts his own show on WCEG entitled Issues and Answers on Mondays at 4 p.m. Hi, Norm.
Hello, doctor. How are you?
We have a very special guest this evening, Miss Shavett Athouris. She's been a registered nurse for over 20 years. She has served as an RN case manager at various hospitals and clinics. She's provided psychiatric rehabilitation treatment and assertive community treatment teams, and has worked as a director of nursing for well-known agencies. She was a nursing professor for 5 years at a university in Atlanta, Georgia. She has always been compassionate with a caring heart, which led to her volunteering thousands of community hours at homeless shelters to enrich the lives of homeless men, women, and children. She's the marketing director with Surge 365 Travel Company. She's the CEO of Pyramia, which are all natural-based products that provide a safe alternative to alcohol-based sanitizers. And she's also the administrative director for a nonprofit where they help develop and mentor youth. You can visit the website at www.theosmovement.org. Okay. Welcome, Shavett.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So the topic this evening is the S word, suicide, part 2. Again, the S word, suicide, part 2. Since our last program aired 2 weeks ago, there have been close to 2,000 suicide deaths in the US and close to 30,000 worldwide. That's since our last show. There have been close to 2,000 suicide deaths in the US and close to 30,000 worldwide just in the 2 weeks since our last show. And please note that the term that is to be used is died by suicide. We don't want to say committed suicide because that implies that suicide is a criminal act. So the correct term is died by suicide, not commit. I know people often use that term, commit, so we don't want to use that term. I have 2 friends that have recently lost the same friend, actually now 3 friends that have lost the same friend to suicide. His friends are saying that, quote, he was the absolute last person that any of us would have imagined would take his own life. He was described as the type of person who would, quote, light up the room when he entered. He, quote, appeared to be on top of the world. Similar feelings were expressed about Miss Chesley Christ, the Miss USA, who died by suicide last month, and we discussed in our last show. How can you really know what's going on in the inside? We can all wear a mask so well. People oftentimes don't look like what they're going through. I've been really touched by the number of friends that I've spoken to in the last few days who have been affected by the suicide of a friend or family member. When a person dies by suicide, the lives of another 135 are affected, and the lives of 15 to 30 are affected severely by that suicide. So Shavett, I wanted to get some input about this friend that you lost, and as it turns out, Penny knows this friend too. So what are your thoughts about his situation?
Well, Dr. Wanzo, it's very devastating, to hear when someone have died by suicide. People a lot of times deal with so much from childhood up through their teenage years, even into adulthood. And oftentimes, so many of those things that they've experienced in their lifetime just have not been dealt with. Part of it is just because they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know who to talk to. So it's internalized. It's almost like a self-containing prison.
Yes.
They're imprisoning themselves, or they're falling apart on the inside, but appear to be having it all together, so to speak.
Exactly.
And this particular individual who passed away, I think it was 2 days ago, by suicide, appeared that way. He appeared to have everything all together, seemed very happy, had a very happy spirit about him, would enter the room and just captivate the room, and people would gravitate to him. So it's a shock to everyone that I know that knew him, that this happened to this particular individual, here in the Atlanta, Georgia area. But, it's just, sometimes people get to a point to where they can't find peace internally. And the stigma is you have to have a mental illness or have a diagnosis of depression to be depressed, but that's not the case.
Right.
All of us at some point get up, we have ups, we have downs. We may even get a little bit depressed at times, but when that depression is prolonged, you don't have to have a mental illness, or you don't have to be diagnosed with depression. It can foster and it can grow, and it can weigh on you. So, again, it's very sad, not just for this individual, but so many of the thousands of families that you're talking about in the last 2 weeks. 30,000, nationally, and 2,000 in the US. That's a big problem.
It's a lot of people. One of the other people was, there was another beauty queen, a Miss Alabama, who fell from the 3rd floor of a condo in Miami. Well, they are investigating it as a suicide. Right now, they're saying it's accidental, but her family is strongly protesting, saying because of her religious faith, there's no way that she would kill herself by suicide, but it is being investigated as a suicide. And she was another instance of a beauty pageant queen who died by suicide. So that was just, a couple of days ago that they, the family announced it, because they kept saying an accident. They're saying it's accidental, but it is being investigated as a suicide.
Wow. Yeah,
it's interesting that you mentioned about when you die by suicide, that you don't have to be depressed. The statistics show that depression only accounts of up to 60% of suicides. So what about the other 40%? What are some of the other things that are risk factors for depression? So I'll go over some of those. Like if someone has a terminal illness with chronic pain, if someone has a financial loss or job stressors, if there's an end of a relationship or marriage, someone's experiencing legal problems. There are other psychiatric disorders can be a risk factor for depression, such as anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, substance abuse and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. All of those can be risk factors for depression. Also bullying. I think I mentioned in the last show that a couple of years ago, there was a child, I was 6 or 7, who had been bullied and used his parents' gun to shoot himself, a young child, and he'd been bullied. Other risk factors include a positive family history of suicide, if someone's socially isolated, ACE, what we call adverse childhood experiences. These are children who've been subjected to abuse and neglect. Sexual and domestic violence can be a risk factor. Easy access to lethal means, such as firearms and medications. 56% of suicides in males are by firearms. A prior suicide attempt is a risk factor. Impulsivity, especially in adolescence. There's rarely a single cause or trigger. Norm, do you have any input or anything you'd like to?
Well, I just wanted to add a few things. Thank you, Doctor. To your numbers, because your numbers sound great, but the numbers I have from the CDC, globally, 800,000 people die from suicide every year.
Yes.
That's twice the number of homicides. That works out to about one person every 40 seconds. Suicide is the leading cause of death in is one of the leading causes of death for young people. And but suicide rates are typically higher for older individuals. And I personally have intervened in at least 2 attempted suicides during my career, and I've had a family member who did commit suicide. It's a devastating thing for families, and I understand the family of the lady, Miss Alabama, because there's this stigma that's left behind is what we have to deal with. And religion, I mean, we can go back in our Bibles and look that suicide was prevalent throughout our Bibles, believers and non-believers. So yeah, it's just a problem.
So what happened with your family member? What do you know anything about the circumstances or how?
Yes,
old?
yes. It's rather a long story. He had been in prison before for aggravated assault, served his time, got out. He had an alcohol problem. He got into an argument, a seemingly violent argument with his parents one night, so violent that they had to call the police to intervene. And his behavior persisted while the police were there. So they figured that because he was intoxicated, they would take him and keep him into custody for a night and release him in the morning. And he hung himself with a t-shirt that night in the jail cell.
How old was he?
He's about 25.
Okay.
And I've interceded with the incident where a gentleman was brought in for domestic violence and was being held, and he attempted suicide in his cell, but we were able to get him down before he completed the act. So it you know, as Ms. Athouris said, that there are several factors that figure into it, and a lot of it has to do with things that are in our past.
One thing I want to call attention to in terms of among African Americans, that they said from 2014 to 2019, the suicide rates among Black people in this country increased by 30%. From 2014 to 2019, the suicide rates among Blacks in the US increased by 30%. What's even more startling is among Black girls, the suicide death rates increased by 182% from 2001 to 2017. Wow. And as we mentioned last time, it's become more common since the pandemic as well.
I think that social media is the great catalyst for that also. It's shown to be that.
For the increased suicidality.
Yeah, it used to be you did all your bullying face to face, but now a lot of your bullying comes from people who are in that cloud. You may not know who they are, and then it's something that instead of just spreading in a small classroom, it'll spread to an entire school or an entire neighborhood. And we know that young people have fragile egos.
Right. People, talk about, that, checking in on your friends. So, there's a saying, check on your strong friends. I actually posted a meme on my Facebook page yesterday. I'd seen it from somewhere else, and I thought, even though it was kind of had a funny tone, but it was really serious. So what the meme shows is a young Black child, maybe 5 or 6. He's holding a notepad and he's got an ink pen. And the caption above it says, "Today, I'm checking up on everyone. When you see this post, just say I'm fine." And I've had people who responded to it, "I'm fine." And then I've had people who say, "Well, I'm not so good." One woman that I need to check on her, she said, "I'm not so good." So people actually did respond to the post. Most people are doing fine, but one young lady said she's not doing too good. So I'm gonna have to check up on her, because she said, "Me, I'm not doing too well." So right there, she was honest and admitted it on this post, but I thought it was really, in a humorous way, but to really check in on people to see how they're doing. And people, are responding to that post.
I think it's rough when we have a person that you described. It's so outgoing and so much the type of person that walks into a room and everybody gravitates towards them. And it's hard to get through that mask sometimes.
It is.
And I think that's what's devastating for people.
Yeah, very. And even with the work that we do and working with mental health patients, especially the ones who do have a diagnosis of depression, for me, it's a red flag when I walk into their home and they're bubbly and happy-go-lucky and, seeming like they're on top of the world, because oftentimes that can be a cover-up. And now we're realizing that even with, our friend who passed away 2 days ago, all of these years, I guess being imprisoned on the inside, it was what we were seeing outwardly was, the happy-go-lucky and just this fun type of guy. But oftentimes, like Dr. Wanzo, like you're saying, it's almost as if you have to literally ask the question, how are you feeling today? Are you okay? Otherwise you just may not know. And oftentimes when I ask my patients that are happy and, talkative and seeming great, when I ask the actual question, how are you doing today? Are you depressed? And they say yes. And I remember one was such a cover-up where I said, well, tell me a little bit more, are you thinking of hurting yourself? And she said, yes. And I said, okay, well, how do you plan on hurting yourself? And she said, well, there's a train track right there behind my house, my apartment. So I'm going to walk out and stand in the middle of the train track and stand there until the train comes. And I had to call 911. And all along the entire session was a complete cover-up. And I almost didn't ask the question on, are you depressed? But that one question led to her literally, she said, I said, well, when are you planning on doing this? Oh, as soon as you leave. I'm going to go stand out on the train track. I just was taken. And that just showed me, no matter how happy someone seems, it doesn't hurt to ask that question, how are you really doing? How are you really feeling?
You're absolutely right. That's why no matter what I'm seeing the person for, whatever they're in for, every time I see every patient, I always ask the question. Every time with every patient, no matter why I'm seeing them, I always ask that question because of that. Because of that. And those are the right questions to ask. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about dying? And have you thought about ways to kill yourself? Those are the perfect questions. And, again, as we talked about last time, there's this myth that people think if you ask someone, you're going to plant the idea in their mind. That could be further from the truth. You have to ask. You have to truly ask and be there and listen to what they have to say.
Right.
And if someone says something about wanting to die, a lot of people, if they were going to kill themselves, they would have done it. But no, you have to take it seriously. Anytime that anyone suggests or makes any comments about wanting to die or hurt themselves, you have to take them seriously. So here's some other signs of suicidality. If someone's talking about wanting to die, kill themselves, if they're looking for a way to kill themselves, like searching online, I'm buying a gun, if they're talking about feeling hopeless or having no reason to live, if they're talking about feeling trapped or in unbearable pain, if they're talking about being a burden to others, if they're increasing their use of alcohol or drugs, if they are becoming more anxious, agitated, or behaving recklessly, if they're sleeping too much or too little, if they become more withdrawn or isolative, if they show rage and talk about seeking revenge, or if they're showing extreme mood swings. So those are some things to look out for.
I just like to add something. This is stats from 2017, so they a little predate your statistics, but I'm sure it's consistent that from the data from the United States indicate that firearms account for 46% of all suicides. And like you said, 60. And
males and males. Right. Yeah.
And in other high income countries where the prevalence of firearms in the household is lower, firearms account for only 4.5%.
Wow.
So gun advocates, or as I call them, gun fetishists, this is the end result of that. And it's sad. It's very sad. And I think about what you're saying, and a song popped up in my head by Smokey Robinson called The Tears of a Clown, where the tears of a clown when there's no one around. So people see the happy side of people, and then when they're off by themselves, that's when things change.
Wow.
Right. Wow.
And that's unfortunate, quite unfortunate.
Wow. See, and that's the thing, we say suicide is preventable. It is preventable.
Definitely. Yeah, and out of the children that we have, the 7 boys that my husband and I have, we've experienced it at home. And it is real, and especially teenagers as well go through so much in their lives at school with their peers. They have peer pressure to do various things. And oftentimes, as we all know, we were there, we were teenagers. It may be situations, oftentimes the situations to where, the teens don't want to talk to their parents about whatever is going on or how they're being pressured. And they may not be a child that's strong enough to tell their peers no, because they want to belong. They want to, say yes to whatever it is just because they want to be in the in clique or the in crowd and not be singled out and called names. So a lot of times that causes them to give in. And, when doing what we do, I've definitely found that also with teenagers, if you're out there and you're listening and you have teenagers, don't look at counseling or therapy as a negative, because your child may tell the therapist or talk to the therapist about things that they won't talk to you about, but it will help them get over and to get past whatever it is that they're dealing with, from birth to whatever age they are. They can help them to get over those past pains and things that, that they've dealt with and experienced in their life so far.
Mhm. So at this point, I wanted to give out the suicide prevention helpline. So if someone is acutely suicidal, this is a number they can call 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It's a suicide helpline. That number is 1-800-273-TALK, which is 8255. Again, 1-800-273-TALK or 8255. And they can text HOME to 741-741. Again, they can text HOME, HEME, to 741-741. Those are the suicide prevention hotlines and the crisis lines. If someone's acutely suicidal, they can always call those numbers to talk to someone immediately.
Exactly.
Yeah, we had this experience just this past weekend where a former coworker was in an extreme state of depression. And we had basically a tag team keeping this person engaged for about 4 days. They seem to have gotten through it now, but we were all very, 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 very concerned. And a lot of times it's not up to the person who is suffering to call that number. It's up to us to call that number.
Exactly.
And I think we put a little bit too much weight sometimes on the people who are suffering.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
That's
Yeah. Wow. You know, something that came across an article in terms of what I think is a suicide waiting to happen. I guess you all know about, Ted Turner, who founded CNN.
Yes.
Well, he is 83 and he suffers from something called Lewy body dementia, which is the same kind of dementia that Robin Williams had, and as a result, ending up taking his life. The thing about Ted Turner's father shot himself with this silver gun, and Ted Turner carries a silver gun, which for me, I can't understand why the people around him allow that. He's got Lewy body dementia and he's bipolar, and he carries the same gun that his father used to kill himself. I mean, to me, that's like a suicide waiting to happen.
Wow, very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there was an article about it. His biographer, wrote that, right, that he carries around the same silver gun that his father used to kill himself. So he's got 3 risk factors: family history of suicide, his father killed himself, he's got bipolar himself, and then he's got this chronic illness, Lewy body dementia. So he's got 3 major risk factors for suicide, but yet his caretakers allow him to carry this silver gun.
Well, I can identify with that because I'm going through a situation now with a mother-in-law who is going through basically advanced stages of dementia. And no, there's no indication of there are no weapons around or anything like that, and she's not suicidal. But when you have people in a household, and I'm using my mother-in-law as an example, who have these extremely strong controlling personalities, that the people around them, even when these people are not fully in possession of their faculties, the people around them still tend to submit to whatever these people are saying or doing. So those people around Ted Turner are probably intimidated by him still and are worried about offending him by removing that weapon from him.
Doesn't he have children? Doesn't he have children?
I don't know. I'm not sure. But you said he has caretakers. And I don't know how much fortitude or how professional they are, because it seems to me that with the modicum of professionalism, you would take steps to notify somebody to remove that weapon from you.
Wow. Yeah, he's got Lewy body dementia. That's the same type of illness that Robin Williams had that led him to him killing himself.
But on the other hand, and I'm definitely not one who's into euthanasia, but the song "Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen," "Nobody Knows My Sorrow." People who are suffering and can see no way out. This could be a factor as to why they would contemplate doing something like that.
Well, in some states it's illegal. They have doctor-assisted suicide. So I can't remember which states it is legal, but there are several states where it is legal, doctor-assisted suicide. Now, that's a tough one for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's
really
very prevalent in certain places in Europe.
Mm.
Doctor-assisted suicide, and there was at one time there was a big movement for it here in the United States.
Mm.
It seems to have faded away somewhat, but yes, there are
But
some
there
states.
there are some states
Yes.
where it's legal, because I did hear of a case recently where I think it was a physician who had another physician to assist him in his suicide. But I guess I hear that some people, with chronic pain or a terminal illness, don't want to go through the suffering, so they rather, I guess for them, it's a matter of the quality of their life. I don't know who's to say. I don't know. I mean, I can't judge anybody because I'm not in their shoes, so, but, who's to say, what any of us would do? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can seriously say I would never do it, but I mean, I can't, judge anybody else. I don't know what their pain is and their circumstances, because when people choose to end their life, it's because they are suffering, and the suicide is just a way out of the suffering and the pain. So it's not that they want to die, it's just that they want to end the suffering.
Correct.
Yes.
Especially when there's no possibility of things getting better.
Exactly.
But I always I think about my friend. I was a caretaker for a terminally ill patient for quite a while, and there's a point where the morphine just doesn't work. But the other part of it is to wake up and be able to see the sunshine each day. Brings joy to that person, despite what suffering they may be going through. So I think there are two ways of looking at it. Again, I'm not in support, never will be in support of euthanasia. But sometimes it's a matter of walking a mile in somebody's shoes.
Exactly. Because you see, if the morphine's not working, I can't imagine. Because for me, pain, I can't stand pain. I mean, pain is, so I can't imagine what it would like to be in pain that's not controlled by morphine. I can't even imagine what that would be like. I just can't imagine.
Right. Yeah. It's tough. Let's see. 1.4 of global deaths in 2017, 1.4% of global deaths in 2017 were from suicide. But in some companies, this was as high as 5%. And I think that's in some countries. There are certain cultures that are not stigmatized so much by suicide as it is in our culture. And I guess that's why it's higher.
What is that, like that Japanese kamikaze? What's it called? They impale themselves on the sword. Is that
kamikazes?
Yeah.
But if you go back in ancient history, it was prevalent. Romans, I forget what they called it. It wasn't political suicide, but whatever it was more or less accepted. Even if we go back, since this is Black History Month, slave suicide was prevalent.
Oh yes.
Back before the Civil War.
Yeah.
And we do know that many slaves committed suicide on the ships that were coming from Africa.
Oh, rather, right. Yes. And then there have been some plays about when women have killed themselves and their child rather than for them to be, existing in slavery. So you're right. Suicide has all kind of historical ramifications. Hey, Paul, Officer Paul is here. Hey.
Hey, Doc. Hey, Ma.
Hello there. How are you?
Hey.
Another day in the neighborhood.
Yeah, so we're talking about suicide again. So any thoughts or experiences or things that you wanted to talk about?
Actually, I enjoy just listening to you guys right now.
Okay.
I just find it amazing that it's even more prevalent now, especially among successful African Americans.
As one of the statistics I quoted that among Blacks, that suicide is 30% more common now among Blacks, 30%. That's a lot of people. 30%.
And
That's so being Black ain't hard enough. Hey, Shavett.
Hey, Paul.
How are you, dear?
I'm doing fantastic, trying to hang in there, trying to be okay in all of what's going on right now. But I know another issue with the depression is, the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably some of the reasons why it's been such an increase, because people's lives have just changed dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
From experiencing so many deaths within their families to just changing their daily routines, losing their jobs, the financial pressures of being possibly homeless and, not having anywhere to live, being even, socially, they can't socialize the way that they used to. So now they're, isolating, especially during the times where we were, the countries was shut down and you couldn't really go anywhere. It's so many factors that cause the anxiety and the fears and loneliness, I guess, is what it should say, what I should say. But within all that, the information that Dr. Wanzo gave for you to call someone, talk to someone, don't go through this alone. That just, really causes it to worsen. Because I know there's somebody listening out there, you may have even contemplated suicide, but know that you are unique, you are special.
Yes.
You're not the only one in the world who has experienced trauma. All of us have gone through things in our lives that some have been dealt with and some have not been dealt with. But use that number that Dr. Wanzo gave to call the hotline or call to get, some type of counseling just to talk it out, and so that you can really see your worth and see that you are special.
So I'll repeat the number, the suicide helpline, 1-800-273-TALK, TALK, or 8255, 1-800-273-TALK, TALK. The crisis text line is text HOME, HOME, to 741-741. Text HOME, HOME, to 741-741. So I know you were mentioning about the pandemic. Depression rates tripled during the pandemic, tripled.
Wow.
Yeah, tripled.
And I think one important thing about that is, I hate to get too technical, but we are basically communal species.
Exactly.
And a lot of times, the pandemic is such an abnormality, and sometimes people can have too much time to themselves. And we're at those times when we're interacting with people, and that sort of keeps us in balance. And then once we're isolated.
Yes. That's a very big factor. Yes. Yes. So we've talked about in some other shows how to stay connected, like through social media, like Zoom, different other kinds. I can't remember some of the other ones. The Party Line, our family used to do that every Sunday, but they've since closed that down. But any way that you can be connected through, well, like I said, FaceTime for me, like I said, I FaceTime my little 5-month-old grandson every day. So for me, that's the way to stay connected. We FaceTime every day. So FaceTime, whatever other ways that you can keep connected is very important.
Yeah, we have to realize again that depression is something that's real. We all go through it at some point. It's just that for some people it becomes more intense and lasts for a longer period of time than what it should. And that's when we run into problems.
And it is treatable. Depression is treatable. That's the thing I want people to understand, that there is hope. It is treatable. If someone said that they had never heard of doctor-assisted suicide, maybe we can do another show and I can talk more about that. But it is something where the doctor assists the patient in their suicide. And it is legal in some states. I don't know, I can't recall which states, but it is legal in several states in the United States.
I think one of
Well, to make that statement, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think it's legal in one of the Carolinas, one or both of the Carolinas. I'm not sure. But I remember reading about it recently.
Mhm.
But it's called euthanasia.
Actually,
if
they call
anybody
it doctor-assisted suicide. That's what it's
Mhm.
called, doctor-assisted
I,
suicide.
find it hard to believe someone is aware of that, unless they're under the age of 30. Dr. Kevorkian was a household name at one
Right.
time.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a major issue because a lot of people felt it was so unethical for a doctor to
Right.
be assisting in suicides.
Right.
But it makes sense. And Dr. Kevorkian really, truly was now performing a service to limit suffering. It wasn't about
Exactly.
murder. It was about prolonging a life that the individual had
Mhm.
decided they no longer wanted
Mhm.
for whatever reason.
Mhm.
At what point do you have the legal right to terminate your life?
Mhm.
I think that there's a point that's missing, and I know this because I've taken care of a terminally ill patient, and I've been around terminally ill people. And the one thing you will always hear from people who are grossly sick or immensely ill is that I don't want to be a bother. And then
Exactly.
when people around them conduct themselves as if that person is a bother, that's when you have these thoughts of suicide coming in, because they are more concerned about not hurting or inconveniencing the people around them than they are with trying to maintain their health as best they can and see another day. And I think that figures into it. I have seen it in families. I have seen it in families, and that has to be a factor that figures into it, not the pain, because believe me, the capacity to take extreme amounts of pain is within us all. But the fact of being a burden to your family or those around you, that figures into it. That's why it's important to try to maintain as much as possible, the mental health of people for whom we're taking care of when they're going through these serious illnesses, because they become very perceptive about your attitude and how you're treating them.
Someone listed the states where it's legal. Thank you. 11 states where physician-assisted suicide is legal. Those states are California, Colorado, DC, Hawaii, Minnesota, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New Mexico, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington. So we have 11 states where physician-assisted suicide is
Do you
legal.
know what all those states have in common?
Marijuana? No,
Okay. I thought that would prolong life, but those are all very liberal states. And California is right at the top of the list.
Right.
Those are all extremely liberal states.
And isn't marijuana legal in those states too?
Yes.
Yes.
And if you notice, not one state was named in the Bible Belt.
Oh yeah, you're right.
So now it's more or less, it went from a political issue to also a religious one.
Oh.
That's right up there with abortion rights. Women fighting for control over their body to determine when they want to terminate a pregnancy. You have people with a terminally ill, depressed, medically terminally. When do they have the right in sound mind, not because of the factors around them, not because of anybody or being a burden, but when do they have the right to say, you know what, I don't want to continue a life with no quality of life? And see, that's one thing we got to take in consideration too.
Well, there is, because I'm going through this now, there is a policy for terminally ill patients where they get to a point where there's no medical intervention that will be recommended. So we just allow things to take their course. So yeah, there is a point when medical intervention stops.
And I think that's the patient right at that point, because how much more morphine can you take? Yes, we have pain tolerances, but the body is wonderful at adapting with tolerances. And when you start needing more and more and more to the point that you're now in the zombie stage, you know, I have friends and family, unfortunately at that age and that point in their life, they're in chronic pain. And most of it was work-related pain from all the years of, you know, their career, especially if they were out there in the field working in physically demanding careers. It takes a toll on your body. You know, all of us on this platform tonight, we are past that age where you wake up in the morning, you have aches and pains. You're like wondering what happened to me at night.
Yes.
I would have never imagined feeling the way I feel now, waking up for the full night of sleep. I went to bed great. The minute my feet hit the ground, there's a pain going through. Man, the stiffness is unbelievable. I'm still trying to come to terms with the fact that, listen, I'm not as young, nimble, even as beautiful as I used to be. But the pain is unreal to me because I don't have any chronic medical issues. But sometimes even just getting out of the car, I love road trips. It takes a while for me to get past the stiffness and pain just from a 5-6 hour drive. That kills my enthusiasm to get out and enjoy the reason I took the drive anyway, whether we had a resort or went for a concert. I'm starting now to experience minor pain that I have no rationality for other than age. But imagine those who have chronic everyday medical pain. Right.
I can't imagine because Norm mentioned like pain so severe that the morphine doesn't control them. That's something that I would be afraid of, that kind of pain.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Who wants to get to a point where they're now telling you there's nothing medically we can do, and it's time for you to be transferred to a hospice? That's a death sentence. We already know I'm going. I already know that my numbers are short, but now I don't want to be in a position to situate. Now I'm like, my last days, the quality of life is so bad. Now I got to be somewhere where they, no matter how well they may take care of me, they know I'm checking in, but I'm not checking out. My grandfather, when he passed at 88 years of age, mind you, Trinidad is totally different than here from in the US. The medical care that my grandfather broke his hip. He's been fiercely independent his whole life, especially in them late 80s. But I remember when my mother called us, it's me and specifically, and she's like, listen, how soon can you be home? Your grandfather, you know, he's leaving the hospital, he's heading home. I'm thinking, oh my God, grandfather's, you know, recovering. He's good. He's always been a tough old bird. Well, in the process, I was heading out of the country for a well overdue vacation. Make a long story short, just before the ship sailed for the port of Miami, my mother called and she said, listen, can you make it to Trinidad here? I need you here the next day or two. Next day or two, I'm on a week cruise. Grandfather didn't go home because he was recovering and feel better. My grandfather, right to the end, was defiant in his life. He's not dying in somebody's hospital, but he was at peace. He wanted to go home to peck in peace, surrounded by those who he loved. That was that quality of life that he'd already made the decision. This is the beautiful way to end a quality life. It was awesome. To his last breath, he was where he wanted to be, where who wanted to be, and he was so content with passing. It was almost like, man, I want to go just like that. He passed on his own terms.
Well, we're talking about people my age now. What about the younger people who we can help to keep from doing from death by suicide, because I think that's what we're trying to do.
Right, yes. And just like Paul is mentioning, actually feeling the pain and it being excruciating for some individuals with health problems. The problem with depression is some individuals feel that same pain internally.
Exactly.
That same exact pain that is so painful and unbearable and excruciating is what some of them feel who get into that deep state of depression.
And they want to end the pain, and that's all.
Right,
and
they
think about that.
exactly
The pain. The
right,
pain is unbearable.
Exactly. So some of the things that you can do is, of course, outside of talking to a family member or friends or the number that Dr. Wanzo gave you, you can also get plenty of rest. You know, you can take a walk or ride a bicycle, do some type of physical activity, and also try eating healthy. You know, Googling foods to feed the brain, you know, that can help with that. And outside of that, Paul mentioned going on a cruise. You know, I will say statistically, it shows that people that take vacations, even if it's periodically, lengthen their life. It helps to make it a brighter day.
That's one thing. The idea of it's a pandemic. I would always take several vacations.
Exactly. So oftentimes people will resort to various drugs, alcohol, which is such a temporary fix. Because once the high is gone, now the problems are still there. The pain comes back and it becomes more and more excruciating. But one way to help deal with that is to, you know, as they say back in the old days, go to grandma's house. Or you know, if you don't want to take a vacation because of the pandemic, you know, or take a vacation somewhere else. It will really, I won't say take all of your pain away, but it will allow you to breathe. It will allow you to breathe and to kind of, you know, think about, you know, what your life and what it is that you're doing, and just relax for a moment and get away from all the hustle and bustle of this thing called life, you know, that so many of us are trapped in.
I like that Prince phrase, dearly beloved, we're all gathered today to get through this thing called life.
Yes.
And speaking of Prince, he was in chronic pain, you know, from the hip and all his, you know, dancing in boots and whatever. And so he became addicted to opiate painkillers. In fact, that's how he ended up dying from an overdose of fentanyl, which is an opiate pain medicine. That's how he ended up dying, because he was addicted to painkillers. But also,
but I do want to say this. I have to be that voice for those who have sound mind, regardless of what we on the outside looking in think. If they make that decision that the life they have is no longer the life they want, I still got to ask the question, do they have the right to terminate it? Especially if they have sound mind.
Well, when you keep saying, you keep saying sound mind, that's like it's like a kind of a red herring. Because we talked, before you came, we said that 60% of people who die by suicide are depressed. That's 60%. The other 40%, it has to do with financial problems, relationship issues, you know, legal. So it has nothing to do with your mind. It's whatever stress that you're going into that you feel is unbearable. So it has nothing to do with the sound.
I hear you, Doc, but those are outside variables.
No, it's not. No, that's 40% of suicides are caused by these variables. 40%. That's a big percentage. Only 60% is caused by depression. So 40% can be caused by other stressors.
There's no, I hear you, but I'm going to keep asking. When does a person have the right, regardless of what the reason, to say, hey, you know what, I'm good with this life. I'm done. You know, they still have some rationality to determine when in your life you want to go with it. And the reason I'm saying this, because suicide has been such an intricate part of humanity since we started organizing in communities and religions and so forth. People keep forgetting. And the ancient, and even now, and especially in Asian cultures, suicide is considered an honorable way of maintaining the family name, regardless of whatever the reason that the person felt they dishonored the family. You know, the Japanese had a term called, and I hope I pronounce it right, harikiri. H-A-R, yeah.
Right. We
And
did
that
talk
is
about that.
considered-
Yeah, we talked about that
Yeah.
before you came. We did talk about that. Yes, harikiri.
Yeah, and that's and these are honors. And then there are other societies since the beginning of time. You know, people keep forgetting that once upon a time, even in the U.S., you know, dueling was a way of settling arguments among gentlemen.
Mhm.
And that was a suicide any way you look at it, because when you engage in any kind of gunfight
Mhm.
to settle a score or to prove a point, somebody is going to die.
Right. But we're
And-
talking about today's current
Yeah.
climate and suicide, how, you know, it's 30% increase since the pandemic. How do we deal with it? Because it is preventable. And that's our goal, is to prevent it. And depression is treatable. So that's our goal for those that are depressed, to treat depression.
Well, the interesting thing I find about that, suicide rates are rising, especially among Black women, long before the pandemic started.
Right.
Remember correctly-
182% among Black women, 182%.
Exactly. Long before the pandemic came along, because in our early days at WCEG, we actually did a show because the numbers were increasing so rapidly that we felt it was a chronic need because it was becoming a national epidemic. And the thing that I find interesting now is how people are casual, where it went from once upon, especially among the Black community, or suicide, that's a white thing, we don't do that. Well, you look at it now, not only are we engaging in it, like you just said, the numbers are rapidly increasing, especially for strong Black women who were really truly the backbone of our
Okay, now
community.
we're talking about the strong Black woman thing too. Now that's another kind of stigma that women have in terms of they have to carry everything. So that's a myth too, this having to be the
Yeah.
strong Black woman. I think
I-
Norm had something.
I just want to add something. I probably lived a lot more life than probably, but I've had so many experiences in my family. And the one, I remember my brother many years ago. And the one thing that I told him, and it's relevant to what we're saying now, is that you say that we have an individual has a right to take his life whenever they get ready to do it. Well, the problem with that, as I explained to my brother, is that if you're living on an island all by yourself and there's no one dependent upon you, and you don't have a family and friends who look up to you, okay, maybe that's okay. But if you have people around you who care for you, who are willing to help you through anything that you're going through, then you have to think about the other people, the people who are grieving right now, who shouldn't be grieving, because you decided, or I'm bad to say that you decided, because if you've ever been, I've been around a lot of people who die. The hardest thing for your body to do is to die, because your body will fight and fight and fight not to die. You have to be around people to actually see that. So this whole thing about killing yourself is really what your body is telling you. This is abnormal. This is something that should not happen, because your body is constructed to fight that.
Exactly, for
Yes.
survival,
Yes.
is primary, yeah.
And I would add also, to piggyback on that, is, you know, if you're out there and you're listening and you are dealing with depression, and maybe, you know, your peers or your family may not be aware of that, I want you to start speaking life into yourself. Affirmations is something that's been around for many years,
Yes.
but it can definitely help talk to your brain and your mind to let you know your true worth. So you can Google affirmations for depression, or affirmations for anxiety, or whatever you're going through. Just say affirmations and type the word. So I'm going to leave you with this from me, where it says, my sadness and my depression do not define me. Every day is a gift, and I am blessed to see today. I will see tomorrow and the next. And I have made it this far. I won't stop now. I am loved. I'm appreciated. I am more than what people think I am. So what you need to do is start speaking life into yourself, into your being, into your space, into your spirit. Google it and do it every single day for at least 21 days. And you will start to see a change. You will start turning the ship around and start believing and knowing that depression will not define you.
I think that is beautiful, and that's a perfect way to end today's show. Thank you to our listening audience, and thank you for all of our guests and co-hosts. So we look forward to seeing you in another 2 weeks. I think this is a very still timely topic, so we'll probably be continued until the next show. So have a good evening, and thank you everyone for listening.
WCEG, speaking life into the community.
Yes.
Yes.